The call came at 2:30 in the morning, jolting me awake in my sterile hotel room in Manhattan. Agnes's voice, usually so composed and measured, crackled with an urgency that sent ice through my veins. "Eleanor, dear, I'm so sorry to wake you, but there are people in your house. Strangers. I can see lights on, and I heard children's voices. Should I call the police?" My heart hammered against my ribs as I fumbled for my laptop, nearly knocking over the glass of water on the nightstand. "No, Agnes, wait. Let me check the security cameras first. It might be a malfunction." But even as I said it, a sick feeling bloomed in my stomach. I knew it wasn't a malfunction. Somehow, impossibly, I knew exactly who was in my house. The security app loaded with agonizing slowness, the hotel Wi-Fi choosing this moment to crawl. When the feed finally appeared on my screen, the breath left my lungs in a single, sharp gasp. There, sprawled across my brand new sectional sofa like he owned the place, was my brother Marcus. His wife Serena stood by my bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines with an expression I knew all too well. Disdain mixed with calculation. And their children, Tyler and Lily, were jumping on my window seat, their shoes leaving muddy prints on the cushions I had spent 3 weekends searching for. I clicked through the camera feeds with trembling fingers. Kitchen, living room, my office. Each view revealed more of the violation. Wine bottles on my kitchen island. Food containers scattered across the marble countertops I had saved 2 years to afford. My throat tightened as I activated the audio feed. "She always had weird taste." Marcus's voice came through clearly, lazy and contemptuous. "Sage green in the bedroom? Looks like a hospital. We'll have to repaint everything if we move in." "If we move in?" The words hung in the air like poison. Serena laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "At least the bones are good. This neighborhood, this house, it's exactly what we need. And honestly, I don't think she can afford to keep it anyway. Did you see the property tax assessment? She must be drowning." I should explain how I got here, to this moment of watching my own family ransack the home I had spent a decade building toward. My name is Eleanor Chen, and I'm a sustainable architect. Not the kind that designs flashy corporate towers, but the kind who transforms forgotten structures into efficient, beautiful spaces that work with the environment rather than against it. It's meaningful work. It's important work. But to my family, it might as well be a hobby. For 10 years, I lived in a cramped studio apartment in a neighborhood my mother refused to visit. I drove a 12-year-old Honda Civic that Marcus loved to mock. I packed lunches, skipped vacations, and watched every dollar with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. Because I had a dream, a vision. I wanted to create my own sanctuary, a place that embodied everything I believed about sustainable living, beauty, and independence. The Victorian brownstone in the historic Riverside district came on the market 18 months ago. It was a disaster, neglected for decades, with outdated systems and a foundation that needed serious work. But I saw past the peeling paint and sagging porch. I saw potential. I saw home. After a brutal bidding war that left me shaking for days, it was mine. I told no one. Not my parents, not my friends from college, and especially not Marcus. There were reasons for my secrecy, reasons that ran deep and bitter. Every family dinner for the past 15 years had been a carefully orchestrated showcase of Marcus's achievements. His promotion to senior analyst, his beautiful wife, his perfect children, his 3-bedroom condo in the trendy downtown district. Meanwhile, I was the afterthought, the perpetual child who had never quite figured out how to be a proper adult. "Still drawing little houses, Ellie?" Marcus had said at Christmas dinner last year, his voice dripping with condescension as he cut into his prime rib. "You know, if you ever want to make real money, I could probably get you an entry-level position at my firm. The pay and benefits are probably more than you're pulling in now with your freelance thing." My father had chuckled. My mother had patted my hand sympathetically, as if I needed comforting from the truth of my inadequacy. I had smiled, nodded, and said nothing, even as rage burned in my chest. That night, I had gone home to my studio apartment and added another $500 to my house fund. Let them underestimate me. Let them assume I was struggling, failing, barely scraping by. When the time came, when my green sanctuary was complete and perfect, then they would see, then they would understand. I had been so careful. Only David Chen, my realtor and no relation despite the shared surname, knew about the purchase. He had been patient with my paranoia, understanding when I insisted on using a different phone number for all correspondence, when I demanded that no information be shared with anyone without my explicit written permission. The closing had been the happiest day of my life. I had sat in the title company's office, surrounded by stacks of papers, and felt the weight of the keys in my palm like a talisman. This was mine. Built with my money, my vision, my determination. No one could take it from me or diminish it, or so I had thought. The security system I installed was state-of-the-art. 6 cameras covering the exterior, 4 inside, motion sensors on every door and window, and a direct line to a monitoring company that would contact me first, then the police if necessary. I had even befriended my neighbors, knowing that good relationships were the best security of all. Agnes Whitmore, the retired literature professor who lived next door, had become something of a mentor. She was sharp as a tack, with silver hair she wore in an elegant bun and eyes that missed nothing. When I told her I would be going to New York for a week to handle a crisis with one of my firm's major projects, she had insisted I give her a spare key. "Just in case, dear," she had said, pressing a container of homemade cookies into my hands. "I'll keep an eye on the place. Robert across the street, and I will make sure nothing happens while you're gone." Robert Martinez, a retired postal worker with an ex-cop's instinct for trouble, had nodded his agreement. "Your house will be just as you left it, Eleanor. We'll make sure of that." I had believed them. I had felt safe. The New York trip was supposed to be straightforward. Review the designs for the Greenway Commons project, fix whatever mistakes the junior architects had made, and fly home. Instead, I found myself drowning in a disaster of epic proportions. The client had changed their requirements at the last minute, the contractor had ordered the wrong materials, and the city inspector had found violations that should never have existed. I had been working 20-hour days, surviving on coffee and adrenaline, trying to salvage a project that represented a significant portion of my firm's annual revenue. And while I was fighting to save other people's dreams, my brother was violating mine. Now, watching the security feed from my hotel room, I saw Marcus disappear into my office. My home office, where I kept my files, my sketches, my private documents. The camera angle gave me a perfect view as he began opening drawers, rifling through papers with the casual entitlement of someone who believed the world owed him access to everything. "Jackpot," he muttered, pulling out a folder. Even from the grainy video, I could see it was my mortgage documents. Let's see what little sister has gotten herself into. In the bedroom, Serena was in my closet. She pulled out dresses I had bought to celebrate my small victories, tried them on in front of my mirror, posed and preened. "Her taste isn't terrible," she said to herself. "We're about the same size. I could definitely use some of these pieces if we move in." Move in. There it was again. The casual assumption that what was mine could simply become theirs, but it was what happened next that made my hands curl into fists, that made tears of rage blur my vision. Tyler, their 9-year-old son, wandered into the living room where my grandmother's piano stood. It was a beautiful, upright, over 100 years old, the only thing I had inherited when she died. I had spent months having it restored, learning to play again after years away from music. Tyler climbed onto the bench, banged on the keys discordantly, then picked up his juice box and deliberately squeezed it, sending bright orange liquid cascading into the instrument's interior. In the hallway, Lily found my architectural drawings, sketches and renderings I had been working on for months, plans for a community center that could win my firm a prestigious award. She picked up markers from the entry table and began coloring on them, her tongue poking out in concentration as she transformed my careful lines into a child's scribble. I was shaking now, barely able to breathe. Agnes's voice cut through my paralysis. "Eleanor, are you still there? What should I do?" "Call the police," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Then, louder. "Call the police, Agnes. These people don't have permission to be in my house." "But dear, the man, he said he was your brother. He told me you'd been in an accident, that you needed urgent medical documents from your home office, and he showed me a text message from your number asking him to help." My blood ran cold. "He what?" "He was very convincing, Eleanor. He even showed me his driver's license to prove he was Marcus Chen, your brother. He said you were in the hospital and couldn't call yourself, that it was an emergency." I gave him the spare key. Oh God, I gave him the key. "Agnes, it's not your fault. He lied to you. He manufactured evidence." I was already pulling up my phone records, and sure enough, there were no messages to Marcus. Nothing. He had forged texts, created an elaborate lie, all to get into my house. But why? What could he possibly want? I got my answer as I continued watching the feed. Marcus and Serena had retreated to the kitchen, their heads close together in conspiracy. "I still can't believe she bought a house without telling anyone," Serena said, uncorking a bottle of my wine, a nice Pinot Noir I had been saving for a special occasion. "Does your family know?" "No." Marcus's face was tight with some emotion I couldn't quite read. Anger? Jealousy? "I can't figure out how she managed it financially. Either she's up to her eyeballs in debt, or there's something she's hiding from us, some income stream we don't know about." Serena laughed, that brittle sound again. "Maybe she has a rich boyfriend we haven't met, or an inheritance she kept secret." "Whatever it is," Marcus said slowly, his eyes calculating, "she's clearly trying to show up the family. Buying a house in this neighborhood is way above her pay grade. She's going to bankrupt herself trying to keep up appearances." They were wrong, so completely, insultingly wrong. But they didn't know that, couldn't conceive that I had simply been disciplined, focused, and strategic about my finances for a decade while they spent money they didn't have to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford. Serena took a long sip of wine. "We should offer to help her. Maybe suggest we move in together to share costs. This place is big enough for both families, and it would be a major upgrade from our place. My apartment, I knew, was significantly smaller and in a less desirable area than this house. They had been complaining about it for years, but couldn't afford to move. And now, here was my home, ripe for the taking if they could just convince me I needed their help. Marcus nodded slowly. Or we could offer to buy it from her. Frame it as doing her a favor, helping her out of a financial hole before she gets in too deep. I bet we could get it for under market value if we time it right, catch her when she's starting to struggle with the payments. The audacity of it stole my breath. They were actively planning to manipulate me, to steal my home through a combination of lies and manufactured concern. But they weren't done. Marcus stood up and walked back to my office, Serena following with her wine glass. I watched in horror as he found the safe in my closet. I had installed it to keep my most important documents secure. Passport, social security card, birth certificate, deed to the house, banking information, everything that mattered. Wonder what else she's hiding in here, Marcus muttered. He disappeared from view, then returned with a toolkit from my garage. My toolkit, the one I used for small repairs around the house. It took him 20 minutes to break into the safe. 20 minutes of drilling, prying, and eventually smashing the lock mechanism. When he finally got it open, he pulled out the contents piece by piece, photographing each document with his phone. "This is incredible," he said, scrolling through the pictures. "She's making way more than she ever let on. Look at these tax returns. And she put down 30% on this place. Where did she get that kind of cash?" Serena peered over his shoulder. "Your parents need to know about this. She's been lying to everyone about her financial situation." And then Marcus did something that transformed this from a family violation into something far more sinister. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Hey, Mom. Yeah, I know it's late. But I'm at Eleanor's new house." "Yes, you heard me right. Your daughter bought a house and didn't tell anyone." He paused, and I could imagine my mother's shock on the other end. "It gets better. I found documents that show she got inheritance money from Aunt Ruth. A lot of money. Money she kept secret from all of us." My hands clenched so hard my nails drew blood from my palms. Aunt Ruth had died 3 years ago, leaving her modest estate to wildlife conservation charities. There was no inheritance. Marcus knew this. Everyone knew this. He was fabricating evidence, creating a narrative that would turn my entire family against me. My father's voice boomed through the phone's speaker, loud enough for the camera's microphone to pick up. "Ruth left money to Eleanor? That's impossible." The lawyer said everything went to charity. "The documents don't lie, Dad. Looks like Eleanor received a substantial sum that helped her buy this house. It's quite impressive, actually. 4 bedrooms, beautiful garden, recently renovated, in the historic district. And she never said a word to any of us." My mother's voice, hurt and accusatory. "I can't believe she would hide something like this. An inheritance should be shared with family. What else is she keeping from us?" I could picture them in their living room, my father pacing with barely contained anger, my mother wringing her hands, both of them building a narrative of my betrayal based on lies my brother was feeding them. "And there was nothing I could do to stop it from 300 miles away," Marcus continued, his voice taking on a tone of false concern. "We're thinking of throwing her a surprise housewarming party. Get the family together, let everyone see what she's been hiding. It'll be perfect. Once everyone knows about the house and the money she concealed, she'll have a lot of explaining to do. And if she tries to avoid it or push back, that'll just make her look worse. Either way, we can position ourselves as the caring family members just trying to help her make good decisions." The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. Create a lie, spread it through the family, then force me into a public confrontation where anything I said would sound offensive. And all the while, they would look like concerned relatives just wanting the best for me. Serena appeared in the office doorway. "Did you call Greg yet?" she asked, referring to their lawyer friend. "Just about to." Marcus dialed another number, and I watched in disbelief as he asked, "Hey Greg, hypothetical question for you. If someone wanted to transfer property ownership to a family member, what's the easiest way to do that?" "Yeah, like a house." "And if the original owner might be reluctant, is there a way to facilitate the process?" That was when I stopped shaking and started getting angry, not the helpless, frustrated anger I had felt during years of family dinners. This was something colder, sharper, more focused. This was the anger of someone who had finally had enough. I called the police, not the emergency line, but the non-emergency number for the precinct that covered my neighborhood. I spoke calmly and clearly, giving them my name, my address, and the details of the break-in. I emphasized that these were not guests, that entry had been obtained through deception and fraud, and that I had video evidence of property damage, destruction of personal belongings, and the forced opening of my safe. "I know one of the intruders is my brother," I told the dispatcher. "But that doesn't change the fact that he lied to gain entry, he's destroying my property, and he's attempting to steal my personal financial documents. This isn't a family dispute. This is a crime." The dispatcher took my statement seriously, asked if I was in danger, and when I explained I was in New York, promised to send officers immediately. She asked me to stay on the line, to provide real-time updates from my security cameras. Next, I called David Chen. It was nearly 3 in the morning, but he answered on the second ring, his voice alert. I explained the situation in quick, efficient sentences. I need you to email copies of the deed, the title insurance, and the closing documents to the police. I said, I need there to be absolutely no question about who owns this house, and I need you to contact the homeowner's insurance company first thing in the morning about the damages. Eleanor, David said, his voice full of concern. I'm so sorry this is happening. I'll get those documents sent within the hour. Do you need anything else? A lawyer, I said, someone who specializes in property law and family court, because I have a feeling this is just the beginning. Through my computer screen, I watched 2 police cars pull up in front of my house, their lights off but their presence unmistakable. 2 officers approached the front door. Marcus, still confident in his deception, answered their knock with a smile. Evening, officers. Something I can help you with? The older officer, a woman with gray streaking her dark hair, spoke firmly. We've received a report of unauthorized individuals in this residence. Do you live here, sir? Marcus's smile didn't falter. No, this is my sister's house. She's away on business, and my family and I are just checking on things for her, making sure everything's secure. We'll need to speak with your sister to verify that. Can you call her for us? I watched Marcus's face shift slightly, the first crack in his confidence. She's in meetings in New York, very hard to reach, but I can show you text messages where she asked us to come by. Agnes appeared on my porch at that moment, wrapped in a thick cardigan despite the warm night. Officers, I'm the one who called Eleanor, the homeowner. This man, she pointed at Marcus, lied to me to get the spare key. He told me Eleanor was in the hospital and needed urgent documents, but I just spoke with Eleanor, and she's fine. She's in New York, and she definitely didn't authorize anyone to enter her home. The second officer, younger with sharp eyes, turned back to Marcus. Sir, I'm going to need you and your family to step outside. This is ridiculous, Serena said, appearing behind Marcus with Lily on her hip. We're family. We have every right to be here. Actually, ma'am, without the homeowner's permission, you don't. We're going to need everyone to exit the premises now. I watched as my brother and his family were escorted out of my house. Tyler complained loudly about leaving his toys behind. Serena shot venomous looks at Agnes. Marcus tried to maintain his dignity, but his face had gone pale with the realization that his plan had collapsed. The officers confiscated the spare key and took statements from both Marcus and Agnes. They documented the forced safe, the damaged piano, the destroyed architectural drawings. They photographed everything with professional thoroughness. My phone rang. My father, his voice tight with anger. Eleanor, what the hell is going on? Why are there police at your house? And when were you going to tell us you bought a house? I took a deep breath, feeling years of suppressed frustration rise to the surface. Dad, there was no inheritance from Aunt Ruth. Marcus made that up. I bought this house with money I saved over 10 years and a mortgage I qualified for on my own. And I called the police because Marcus lied his way into my home, broke into my safe, destroyed my property, and was plotting to manipulate me into selling it to him below market value. Silence on the other end. Then, my mother's voice. Smaller. Confused. Eleanor? Why would you keep buying a house secret from your family? That's not normal, honey. I'll explain everything when I get home tomorrow, I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. Right now, I need to coordinate with the police to protect my property. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed on the phone with the officers, providing them with video files, written statements, and copies of every document they needed. By the time the sun rose over Manhattan, they had filed a full report, including charges for breaking and entering, vandalism, destruction of property, and attempted fraud. The flight home felt endless. I landed at 5 in the evening, drove straight to my house, and stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, just looking at it. My sanctuary. Violated, but still standing. Still mine. Agnes was waiting on her porch. She hurried over, her face creased with guilt. Eleanor, I'm so terribly sorry. I should have called you to verify. I should have known something was wrong. I hugged her, this woman who had tried to help and been manipulated by someone far more skilled in deception. You did everything right, Agnes. You called me when something seemed wrong. You talked to the police. You were the witness I needed. Thank you. Inside, I walked through each room, cataloging the damage. Orange juice sticky in the piano's interior. Marker scrawls on my architectural drawings, though I had digital copies. Scratches on the safe. Wine stains on my sofa. Muddy footprints on my window seat. But it could have been so much worse. And most importantly, it was still my home. The confrontation with my family came 2 days later. My mother had insisted, her voice on the phone holding an edge I had never heard before. We need to talk about this, Eleanor. All of us. as a family. I agreed, but on my terms. Not at their house, where Marcus would have the home field advantage. We met at my house, in my living room, with Agnes and Robert as witnesses in the next room should I need them. My parents arrived first, looking older than I remembered, confused and hurt. Marcus and Serena came 15 minutes later, making an entrance, trying to control the narrative from the start. Eleanor, we can explain everything, Marcus started, but I held up my hand. No, I'll explain everything. You'll listen. I had prepared meticulously. I laid out 10 years of bank statements on my coffee table, showing the steady accumulation of savings, my mortgage approval letter, my tax returns, proving my income was exactly what it should be for someone in my profession. Every document that demonstrated I had earned this house through my own hard work and discipline. My father picked up the papers, studying them with the careful attention he usually reserved for his own investments. This income, Eleanor, why did we think you were struggling? Because you never asked, I said simply. You assumed that because I didn't work in finance or law or medicine, I must not be successful. But sustainable architecture is a growing field. I'm good at what I do. I've won awards, I've built a reputation, and I've been careful with money in ways that maybe aren't flashy, but they work. My mother looked at Marcus. What about the inheritance from Ruth? This was the moment. I pulled out my laptop and turned it toward them. There was no inheritance. Marcus made that up, but I can show you exactly what he did say and do in my house. I played the security footage, all of it. The conversation about moving in or forcing me to sell, the destruction of my property, the break-in of my safe, the phone call to my parents spreading lies, the call to the lawyer about forcing property transfer. The room was silent except for the audio from the video. I watched my parents' faces as they absorbed what their son had done. My father's expression hardened. My mother covered her mouth with her hand. When the video of Marcus breaking into the safe appeared on screen, my father stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back rigid. Marcus had gone pale. I can explain. Can you? My voice was cold. Can you explain why you lied to an elderly woman to break into my house? Can you explain why you destroyed my grandmother's piano? Why you spread false information to turn our parents against me? Why you consulted a lawyer about stealing my property? I wasn't trying to steal it, Marcus said, but his voice was weak. I just thought, maybe we could help you, share the burden of ownership. By discussing buying it below market value when I was struggling with payments I'm not struggling with, I turned to Serena. And you? Going through my closet, planning which of my clothes you'd keep when you moved in. Did it occur to either of you that this is my home? That I worked for it, earned it, and have every right to keep it private until I chose to share it? Serena's face flushed. If you had been honest with the family from the start, we wouldn't have had to go looking for answers. Your secrecy created this whole situation. That was when my father turned from the window, his voice cutting. No, Serena. Their actions created this situation. Eleanor's privacy is not an invitation to violate her trust. My mother was crying now, but she was looking at Marcus. Why, honey, why would you do this? And there it was. The moment when the perfect son's facade finally cracked. Marcus's face crumpled. And when he spoke, his voice was raw. Because I'm jealous, okay? Is that what you want to hear? Eleanor is the smart one. The creative one. The one doing work that actually matters. And I'm stuck in a job I hate, drowning in debt, trying to maintain a lifestyle everyone expects from me. When I saw her house, I couldn't stand it. I was supposed to be the one who bought the first family house, not my baby sister who draws pictures for a living. The confession hung in the air, ugly and honest and devastating. My mother reached for him, but he pulled away. I felt something unexpected then. Not triumph, but sadness. All these years, we had both been performing for our parents' approval, but in opposite directions. He had been building himself up. I had been making myself small. But sympathy didn't mean I would accept what he'd done. I need you to understand something, I said, addressing everyone in the room. I've spent too many years making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger, accepting contempt because I wanted to be accepted. That ends now. I looked at my parents. I love you both. But I need you to respect that my career, my choices, and my life are valid, even if they don't match what you imagined for me. No more dismissive comments about my work, no more assuming I'm failing just because I do things differently than Marcus. My father nodded slowly. We owe you an apology, Eleanor, a big one. We made assumptions that weren't fair. Then I turned to Marcus and Serena. You won't be welcome in my home for the foreseeable future. The damage you caused, physical and emotional, needs time to heal. I'll maintain a relationship with Tyler and Lily because they're children and innocent in this, but that will be on my terms, at locations of my choosing. You can't keep us from our children. Serena started, but I cut her off. I'm not keeping you from your children. I'm keeping you out of my house. There's a difference. Marcus looked at me, and for the first time in our adult lives, I saw him really see me, not as his annoying little sister or his competition or his failure of a sibling. just as a person who he had hurt. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I really am sorry." "I know," I said, and I did. But sorry didn't undo the violation. Sorry didn't restore the trust. Sorry was just the first step of a very long journey. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, exhausted but somehow lighter. The house felt different now. Not violated, but tested. Still standing. Still mine. The next 6 weeks were a blur of insurance claims, therapy appointments, and deliberate healing. I joined a support group for people with toxic family dynamics, which I had resisted for years, telling myself my situation wasn't that bad. Now I knew better. I fixed the piano myself, learning how to clean and restore the interior, replacing the damaged hammers. It became a meditation, my hands working while my mind processed everything that had happened. I repainted the walls that Lily had marked, choosing the same sage green because it was my choice and I loved it. Work helped too. The Greenway Commons project, once saved from disaster, became one of my firm's most celebrated achievements. I won an award, gave a speech at an industry conference, and started getting inquiries from potential clients who wanted their own sustainable sanctuaries. But the real healing came in smaller moments. Morning coffee on my back porch, watching the garden I was cultivating bloom, dinner parties with my chosen family, the friends and colleagues who had supported me through everything. Long conversations with Agnes about literature and life, and the courage it takes to set boundaries. My parents came over for dinner once a week, a new ritual we were building carefully. The conversations were different now. They asked about my work with genuine interest. My father admitted he had never really understood sustainable architecture and asked me to explain it. My mother helped me plant herbs in my garden and apologized, truly apologized, for the years of dismissing my path. Marcus and I exchanged occasional texts. Nothing deep, nothing resolved, but acknowledgement that we were both working on ourselves. He was in therapy too, dealing with the pressure and debt that had driven him to such desperate measures. I didn't forgive him, not completely, but I left room for the possibility of something different in the future. 8 weeks after the break-in, I threw a real housewarming party. I sent invitations to my friends, my colleagues, my neighbors, and my parents. Marcus and Serena were not on the list. The house filled with laughter and music, with people who celebrated my success without resentment. Agnes, as the guest of honor, gave a toast that made me cry. "In all my years teaching literature," she said, her voice carrying across the crowded living room, "I learned that the most powerful stories are about people who discover their own strength through adversity." Eleanor has written quite a remarkable chapter these past few weeks. She's shown us that home isn't just about walls and roofs. It's about boundaries and self-worth and the courage to claim space for yourself in a world that often wants to make you smaller. I hugged her, this unexpected ally, this witness to my metamorphosis. "I never thought my brother's betrayal would be the catalyst for finding my voice," I whispered. "But sometimes the most painful experiences teach us the most important lessons." Later that night, after the last guest had left and I had cleaned up the cheerful wreckage of a successful party, I stood in my kitchen and looked around. This house, this sanctuary I had built with determination and sacrifice, was more than just a structure. It was proof that I could trust myself, that I could create safety, that I could thrive outside the expectations and limitations others had placed on me. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Mom sent me pictures from your party. The house looks amazing. You look happy. I'm glad." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "Thank you. I hope you're finding your own way to happiness too." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement that we were both human, both flawed, both trying to figure out how to be better. I walked through my house one more time before bed, turning off lights, checking locks, feeling the solid reality of my choices surrounding me. In the bedroom, I paused at the window, looking out at the garden where moonlight painted silver patterns on the leaves. This was my sanctuary. Built not just with money and vision, but with boundaries, self-respect, and the hard-won wisdom of knowing when to close some doors so others could open. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through those sage-green walls that Marcus had mocked. I smiled, stretched, and got up to make coffee. In the kitchen, I noticed the herbs my mother and I had planted were already starting to sprout. Small green shoots pushing through dark soil, reaching toward light. I thought about the conversation I would have with my therapist later that week, about the family dynamics workshop Agnes had invited me to attend, about the new project I was starting, about the gradual, imperfect process of healing. But mostly, I thought about how far I had come. From the woman who made herself small at family dinners, to the woman who stood firm in her own space and demanded respect. From the girl who hid her achievements to protect herself from contempt, to the woman who celebrated her successes openly. The road ahead wasn't clear or easy. Family relationships are complicated, tangled with years of patterns and pain. My relationship with Marcus might never be what it once was, might never be truly healed. My parents were trying, genuinely trying, but old habits die hard. But I had something now, that I didn't have before. I had proof, solid and real, that I could take care of myself, that I could make good decisions. 3 months after the break-in, I received an unexpected email from Serena. The subject line read simply, "I need to talk to you." My first instinct was to delete it, but curiosity, or maybe a lingering hope for some kind of resolution, made me open it instead. The email was long, rambling, and surprisingly raw. Serena wrote about her own childhood, about growing up poor and marrying Marcus partly because he represented stability and success. She wrote about the pressure to maintain appearances, the credit card debt they had hidden from everyone, the constant fear of being exposed as frauds. She wrote about watching me from afar, seeing my modest lifestyle, and assuming I was struggling because that made their own struggles feel more normal. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she wrote at the end. "I know what we did was unforgivable, but I wanted you to know that I've started therapy. I'm working on understanding why I was so willing to go along with Marcus's plan, why I didn't stop him when I should have. I'm trying to be a better person, a better mother. I'm trying to teach Tyler and Lily that other people's success isn't a threat to our own." I read the email 3 times, feeling something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I brought it to my next therapy session, reading it aloud to Dr. Reeves, who had become instrumental in helping me navigate the aftermath of the betrayal. "How does it make you feel?" she asked, her pen poised over her notepad. "Angry," I admitted, because 3 months ago, she was in my closet trying on my clothes and planning to steal my house. But also, I don't know, sad? Tired? Part of me wants to believe people can change. "They can," Dr. Reeves said gently, "but change is a process, not an event, and you don't owe her your participation in that process." I carried those words with me as I drafted my response, deleting and rewriting it multiple times over the course of a week. "Serena," I finally wrote, "I appreciate you sharing this with me. I hope therapy helps you find the peace and security you're looking for. I'm not ready for a relationship right now, but I respect the work you're doing on yourself. I wish you well." Short, polite, boundaried. It felt right. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents was evolving in unexpected ways. My mother had started taking an online course in sustainable design, watching videos about green architecture and sending me links to articles she found interesting. It was clumsy and sometimes misguided, but the effort moved me. "I realized I never really tried to understand your work," she told me over dinner one evening, her voice thick with regret. "I just assumed that because it wasn't what your father and I did, it wasn't as valuable. I'm sorry, honey. I'm so sorry." My father had made his own gestures. He had attended one of my presentations at an industry conference, sitting in the back row in his expensive suit, looking oddly out of place among the architects and environmentalists. Afterward, he had approached me with tears in his eyes. "You're brilliant," he had said simply. "I never understood before. But watching you up there, explaining your vision, seeing how people responded to you, I finally get it. You're not just drawing houses, you're changing how people think about living spaces." These moments were healing, but they were also complicated, because along with the apologies came questions I wasn't always ready to answer. "Why didn't you tell us you were doing so well?" my mother asked one afternoon as we worked in the garden together. "Why did you let us think you were struggling?" I sat back on my heels, dirt under my fingernails, and tried to find words for something I barely understood myself. "Because it felt safer," I said finally. Every time I shared good news, Marcus found a way to diminish it. Every achievement became a target. So I stopped sharing. I made myself small and invisible because that hurt less than being torn down. My mother's face crumpled. "We let that happen. We sat there at those dinners and let Marcus belittle you, and we did nothing." "You did more than nothing," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You laughed. You agreed with him. You suggested he get me a real job at his company." She was crying now, silent tears tracking through the dirt smudges on her cheeks. "I don't know how to make that right." "You're making it right now," I said. "By being here, by listening, by trying to understand. That's all I need." But Marcus himself remained a complicated absence in my life. We had progressed from occasional texts to brief phone calls, always superficial, always careful. He was in therapy. He was working on his marriage. He had taken a new position at a different company, one that paid less but caused less stress. He was trying, in his own way, to rebuild his life. "I know I don't have the right to ask," he said during one of our calls, 4 months after the break-in. "But would you ever consider letting me see the house again? Not to go inside, just to stand outside and look at it. To remember who I was that night and promise myself I'll never be that person again." The request caught me off guard. Part of me wanted to refuse on principle. But another part, the part that was learning about compassion and growth, considered it. "Not yet," I said finally. "But maybe someday, when I'm ready." "That's fair," he said quietly. "More than fair." The autumn came, and with it, new projects and new challenges. I was commissioned to design a community center for a low-income neighborhood, exactly the kind of work that had drawn me to sustainable architecture in the first place. The budget was tight, the timeline aggressive, and the stakes high. It was perfect. I threw myself into the work with renewed passion, staying up late, sketching designs, meeting with community members to understand their needs, fighting with contractors about costs and materials. Agnes would find me at midnight, hunched over my drafting table, and bring me tea and cookies. "You know," she said one night, settling into the chair across from my desk, "watching you work is like watching someone discover they can fly. You're so alive when you're creating." I smiled at her, this unexpected friend who had become something like family. I forgot, for a while, how much I loved this. I was so focused on proving myself, on having this house as evidence of my success, that I lost sight of why I wanted to be an architect in the first place. And why was that? Because I wanted to create spaces where people could be their best selves. Safe spaces, nurturing spaces, homes that heal instead of harm. Agnes nodded wisely. "You've created that here, you know, not just in the design of the house, but in the life you're building inside it." The community center project became my redemption and my revolution. I designed it with everything I had learned about sustainable systems, about community needs, about creating beauty on a budget. The local newspaper ran a feature on it, interviewing me about my vision and my process. The article included a photo of me standing in front of my house, confident and professional. Marcus called after the article ran. "I saw the piece in the paper. You look happy, Ellie, really happy." The nickname, which had once felt diminishing, sounded different now, almost affectionate. Almost like he was seeing me as a whole person rather than a competitor or a target. "I am happy," I said, "happier than I've been in years." "I'm glad." There was a long pause. "I'm also sorry. I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. What I did, it wasn't just wrong. It was cruel. It came from the worst parts of myself, the parts that were scared and jealous and desperate. I'm working on those parts, but I need you to know that none of it was your fault. You didn't make me do those things by being successful or private or anything else. I made those choices, and they were wrong." This apology felt different from the others, more complete, more accountable. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "It helps." The holiday season approached, and with it came the question that had been hanging over our family for months. What would we do for Thanksgiving? My mother called, her voice tentative. "Your father and I would like to host Thanksgiving dinner, a small one, just family. And Eleanor, I want you to know that you get to decide if Marcus and Serena are invited. This isn't about forcing reconciliation or pretending everything is fine. It's about respecting your boundaries." I sat with the question for days, turning it over in my mind, discussing it in therapy, weighing what I wanted against what I was ready for. "I'll come," I finally told my mother. "And Marcus and Serena can come too, but I need some ground rules. No one discusses my house, my finances, or my choices unless I bring them up first. No one makes jokes at my expense. No one compares our lives or achievements. We're there to share a meal and be grateful for what we have, not to compete or criticize." "Done," my mother said immediately. "I'll make sure everyone understands." Thanksgiving Day arrived cold and bright. I drove to my parents' house with a sense of trepidation mixed with cautious hope. I had prepared myself for the worst, armed with exit strategies and self-soothing techniques Dr. Reeves had taught me. But something was different from the moment I walked through the door. My father hugged me, a real hug, not the perfunctory pat he usually offered. My mother had set the table with care, placing me in a position of honor rather than relegating me to the corner as she usually did. Marcus and Serena arrived with Tyler and Lily, who ran to me immediately. "Aunt Eleanor," Tyler shouted, "we made you drawings at school." I looked at the crayon pictures they thrust at me, childish depictions of houses and families, and felt something tighten in my chest. These children didn't understand what their parents had done. They just knew that they missed their aunt. "These are beautiful," I said, kneeling to their level. "I'm going to hang them in my office." Over dinner, the conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years. My father asked thoughtful questions about the community center project. My mother shared stories from her design course. Marcus talked about his new job without the usual bravado, admitting it was challenging but fulfilling in ways his old position never was. At one point, Serena cleared her throat nervously. "Eleanor, I never got to say this in person, but I'm truly sorry for what happened at your house. There's no excuse for it. I'm working with a therapist to understand why I was so willing to participate in something so harmful, and I'm trying to do better." "How?" The table fell silent, everyone watching to see how I would respond. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "Apologies are important, but they're just the beginning. Trust takes time to rebuild." "I know," Serena said, "and I'm willing to put in that time, even if it takes years." There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful group hug, but there was a tentative peace, a willingness to move forward rather than staying frozen in the pain of the past. After dinner, as I helped my mother clear the table, she pulled me aside. I'm proud of you, Eleanor, not just for what you've accomplished, but for how you've handled all of this. You've been stronger and more gracious than I think I could have been. I learned from the best, I said, and then added with a small smile. I learned from Agnes. My mother laughed, the sound genuine and warm. Well, maybe I should take lessons from her too. As I drove home that evening, the lights of my neighborhood welcoming me back, I reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. The betrayal that had shattered my illusions had also freed me from them. I no longer needed my family's approval to validate my choices. I no longer made myself small to avoid their contempt. I could be generous with forgiveness without sacrificing my boundaries. The house greeted me, as it always did, solid and sure. I had added my own touches over the months, layers of personality and care that made it uniquely mine. The living room, where I had installed floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, filled with design manuals and novels and photo albums. The kitchen, where I had learned to cook properly, no longer living on takeout and frozen dinners. The garden, where winter preparations were underway, bulbs planted for spring blooms I would watch unfold. But more than the physical changes, there was an intangible shift. The house no longer felt like a fortress I had to defend. It felt like home, a place of rest and creativity and growth. A place where I could be fully myself without apology or explanation. Agnes knocked on my door the next morning, holding a plate of leftover pie. "How was Thanksgiving with the family?" she asked, settling into her usual spot on my sofa. "Complicated," I said honestly, "but better than I expected." Marcus and Serena apologized in front of everyone. It felt genuine. We're not suddenly best friends, but maybe we can build toward something healthier. That's wise, Agnes said. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing. It means choosing not to let someone else's actions define your future. I thought about her words as winter deepened and the year drew to a close. The community center project was approved, with construction set to begin in the spring. I had been invited to speak at a national conference about sustainable design in underserved communities. My firm had promoted me to senior architect, recognizing not just my technical skills but my vision and leadership. On New Year's Eve, I threw a small party at my house. Just close friends, Agnes and Robert, a few colleagues I had grown close to over the years. We toasted at midnight with champagne I had bought without worrying about the cost, standing in my living room that no longer bore any scars from that terrible night in July. To new beginnings, Agnes proposed, raising her glass. To old friendships, Robert added. To finding home, I said, and everyone drank to that.